Hello everyone, I'm Shina Noor Ahmad and I'll be taking classes for English language and literature while you guys prepare for your second semester board exams. So before we move on, I'd like to provide a quick introduction about myself. I have been an ICSEan throughout my school life and I just passed out last year and I stood as the ISC Bihar topper for the humanities stream. And currently I'm at Miranda House. I'm studying English honors. So this pretty much explains why I'm here, but at the same time, I would like to incite that passion for literature in students because that is one of the best things you can get to experience. Now, you know, before moving on, I'll just let you know that a lot of students can write great answers, but they are not able to do so because they harbor this false inferiority complex that if they are not extravagant at English, they can't do great things in life, which is a very trashy notion to keep in mind because you can always do good in life even if you don't have an extraordinary command on English. You can just know the simple ways of communicating in English and you can still be good to go because it is a foreign language for most of us in India, and you can still express yourself in other languages because every language deserves equal respect, so that should be kept in mind. But that doesn't mean you'll ignore English like anything because it's good to learn, it's good to try. So yeah, and while we are discussing the literature paper, I'll just let you know that for literature paper, if you want to ace that, you just have to make sure that you give good points because that is important. If you can give good analytical points and you can supplement your answers and provide evidence for your points through quotations, you will be perfectly good to go. You won't have to worry about anything. So just keep this in mind. When we'll come to the language paper, we'll discuss how to ace it. And I'll be conducting sessions in English throughout because that can actually help you write better answers. When you listen to someone talk to you in English, you understand how to frame sentences, and that saves a lot of time on the papers. So yeah. Now we'll begin with the text, The Singing Lesson by Catherine Mansfield. So what we are going to do is that I'll just explain the important themes and important highlights from the chapter, and then we'll be discussing questions. All right. So, okay, before we move on, we should take care that we understand the author's life, we understand why she writes like this, and we should know about the author. And whenever you are writing answers, even if it is for just 4 marks, it is very important that you understand about the author and that you write about the author in your answer. That can always be an advantage for you. So Catherine Mansfield is a modernist writer. Now modernist writers will always provide an internal monologue on their characters. They'll always give you an insight into the thought process of the character. Why? Because that's how they write, that's how they make it unique. And what purpose does this serve? This internal monologue can actually bring out the extraordinariness of ordinary lives. Like Miss Meadows, she is a school teacher, but even her life has so many insights. She has an extraordinary life, an extraordinary aspect to her life, and this is what the internal monologue brings forth. So you should always keep this in mind. And in this lesson, the singing lesson, the story, basically, the ideas of identity, social acceptance, and belongingness take the forefront. They can actually help you summarize the entire chapter because that is a theme that runs throughout the chapter, and we'll analyze how it works. So, in case of the character of Basil, there is this guy Basil who decides to call off his engagement with Miss Meadows because he doesn't consider it a good idea. Now he writes a letter. Why does he do that? What makes him do that? So maybe he is getting married, or he decided to get married only because he had some desire to get socially accepted. Okay, and how that works. Now in Basil's character, there are things that should be kept in mind and that should be analyzed properly. Like some of the scholars have pointed out that Basil is perhaps a person who is homosexual. Now how, why, it comes as a shock to most of the students, like how, why, where is this mentioned? Now if you take up the hints that are mentioned, that are dropped across the narrative, you can actually make this out. So In the letter, he mentions that he loves Miss Meadows as much as he can love a woman. Now, this is a very subtle hint. Now, this hint is actually supplemented by the idea that after confessing his love for Miss Meadows, he decides to kiss her, right? But he decides to take hold of her ostrich feather boa instead of holding her hand. Now, it may sound absurd, but we can always make out things from subtle hints. Okay, it may not be the absolute truth, but we can still draw out conclusions. And the third thing that should be kept in mind is that in the 19th century, quite absurdly, if a man was obsessed with his looks or with furniture, then it was considered that he's a homosexual. So we see this in the character of Basil. He writes how he wants to, he talks about the stand for, I think, hat hair brushes or something like that. So yeah, whatever it was, but it is mentioned, right? We can see how he is interested in furniture, how he is interested in his own looks, like he feels snobbish when he is well dressed up and he tries to show off. So we see that obsession with looks and furniture in the character of Basil. Now all of this points out that perhaps he's a homosexual and he is just getting married because he wants social acceptance. Obviously in the 19th century you could not come out with utter confidence. People wouldn't accept you like that. Maybe that's why. And also, we'll come back to this point later after I explain the other interpretation. So the other interpretation can be that if you negate this homosexuality angle, you can still consider the fact that he mentions that he is not a marrying man, and he's quite annoyed by the fact that he's often invited to the headmaster's place because he doesn't get any time for himself, right? So this is important because maybe he's just the kind of man who wants time for himself. He doesn't want to get married. He wants to spend time with himself. He wants to explore his passion. Now, why, all of this, both of these theories that, perhaps he's a homosexual or maybe he's just a man who doesn't want to get married. So, all of this points out that maybe he's just getting married because he wants social acceptance. He seems to be an important person. Why? Because he often gets invited to places. He is an important person. And if he wants to, remain alive, remain accepted in that social circle, he should conform to all norms of the society, including getting married. And maybe this is why he has just decided to get married, right? In case of Miss Meadows, there is this need of social acceptance even in her case. She's 30. She's marrying someone who is 5 years younger to her only because she needs to get married. At 30, it is considered too late for a woman to, remain unmarried. And, it's like you shouldn't be remaining unmarried by that stage of life. It is a very common notion even in today's society. So this is why she is in desperate need of getting married. In fact, she even understands that Basil doesn't love her. He cut off that word disgust and he cut it off very lightly. It was properly visible, and he decides to replace it with an even worse word like, regret. How can you regret loving someone? How can you regret that? That makes no sense. He could have taken off the time to write a new letter perhaps, but no, he did not care enough. He did not care. And Miss Meadows understands that. Even then she is ready to marry him. Why? Because she wants social acceptance. And it is quite saddening to see that she works in an all-woman atmosphere. Even then she wants to, get married. Even then she feels like she should run away before the news comes out that her engagement has been broken off, because there are going to be people who are going to mock at her. In fact, we see this in case of the science mistress who comes up and mocks her. Mocks at her. That's the proper usage. So she comes and mocks at her, and this is a very saddening notion to see that even amongst women there is no sort of sisterhood. Sisterhood has often been promoted by feminists, but here we do not see that feeling. In fact, a woman is trying to run away from her workplace because she is afraid that she'll be mocked at. So this is a very saddening notion to observe in the life of Miss Meadows. There are several other important aspects like, music. Music is used throughout. Like in the beginning, we see how Miss Meadows is feeling sad. So she makes her class sing a lament, right? Now this lament, as you read the narrative, you'll find out that there is an escalation of emotionality, right? And this escalation is so intense that there is a pathetic fallacy of the trees outside the school also swinging in a fashion that basically resonate with the emotions of Miss Meadows, right? We observe that. So this whole idea of intensity, intense escalation of emotions, and after that, when she's called to the headmistress's office, there is a sort of calmness, right? Maybe because she is herself too exhausted, but the proper way to explain that would be that she experiences a sort of catharsis. Now, in very basic terms, catharsis is the purging of excessive emotions through an artistic activity, right? So while she indulges in that musical session of singing a lament, her own emotions get purged out through it. There is an escalation, there is an outward escalation of emotions, like there is this pathetic fallacy of the trees resonating with her emotions and everything. So this is very important and it should be kept in mind. Now, another important subtle theme that is expressed is that whatever we do is guided by our emotions. Like Miss Meadows, when she is sad, she ends up hurting Mary. Why? Because she doesn't accept her flower. She doesn't care for that chrysanthemum this morning because she's upset. And when she's happy, she literally forgets all sorts of decorum. She runs. There is this specific description of how she runs. I think it is mentioned that she runs in half strides. Like, she's literally jumping in front of her headmistress. A 30-year-old woman jumping in front of her headmistress because she is excessively happy on receiving the news that her fiance is again ready to marry her. So that shows that, whenever we are happy, we do things that, make us, show our emotions. Whatever we do is guided by our emotions, right? That should be kept in mind. In fact, towards the end, she decides to replace the lament with a song that blesses a wedding. So here you have the theme. And after that, the narrative is quite open-ended. Why it is open-ended? Because we know that there is lovelessness in the marriage, and the thought of what happens to that relationship is constantly on our minds, because we know that they are just getting married out of a mutual need of social acceptability. They are not marrying out of love or something, right? So this stays in our mind, and in fact this open-endedness, it is in fact foreshadowed by an irony. And what is that irony? The irony is that a telegram is often used to send a sad news. Like if you are from the Hindi optionals, you will notice that in case of Sara Akash, the death of Munni, when when Munni dies, it is informed via telegram, right? So telegram is often used for that sort of a news, okay? But here a happy news comes through it. So this irony is kind of foreshadowing that everything is not as happy as it seems, and this should be kept in mind. Now, how to tackle the MCQs? There are going to be 8 marks MCQs. Some of them will be pretty straightforward. Like, there was this MCQ in the specimen paper that has been released, which asked that where is, Miss Meadows thinking about this? Where is she at while this dialogue is being spoken, or this has been mentioned in the narrative, right? So, for those type of questions, you will obviously have to read the narrative very carefully. I'll suggest that read at least twice, so you can keep it in mind, right? And some of them will require analysis. Like there is a question that how is Miss Meadows feeling on, realizing that her engagement has been broken off. So you got 4 options there. One of the options was that she is dumbstruck. No, she is not dumbstruck. She's still speaking. And she's still talking to people. She's not dumbstruck. She did not get a heart attack. All right, she did not get that heart attack. We see no description of the sort. She is not depressed either. She is not showing the symptoms of a person who is depressed. The best answer, the best option is that she is upset and agonized. So some students can get confused between that depressed aspect and that upset and agonized aspect, and that requires thorough analysis, and you have to be very analytical and careful while reading the text if you want to handle such type of questions. So how to tackle subjective answers? Subjective answers you will get for 4 marks, okay? Now for 4 marks, what you can do is that you can either write 2 pages or 2.5 pages. See, length doesn't matter, but it should be a good length. Like, you have to do justice to your answer. So the length should be accordingly. You can either give 4 points or 5 points, as many points as you can, but the points should be valid, okay? Quality will always matter more than quantity. So, while you are mentioning, while you are making points, you should also refer to other parts of the text. How? Now when if you see the specimen, the question is basically the character sketch of Basil in different terms. So while you are talking about that letter, you can mention that he mentions how he loves Miss Meadows as much as he can love a woman, right? So for justifying that point, or for elaborating that point, you should also mention how he is obsessed with furniture, how he is obsessed with his looks and everything else. You can mention that. That will make one point. You can also give a point that maybe he is not a marrying man because he wants to spend time with himself. For that, you can refer to the fact that how he abhors going to the headmaster's home every now and then. So you have to keep that in mind. You have to elaborate it like that. You can also mention how he's an insensitive person. He's insensitive also in the sense that once he writes about buying furniture for their house, then he is writing about leaving Miss Meadows, then he's writing about marrying her. So all of that makes no sense. And one of the other things that I think I should be mentioning here is that, I just missed this point. The point is that Miss Meadows, when she receives the telegram, she feels that Basil has committed suicide. Now, why she feels that? After all, she is a woman. She craves love, right? So she feels that maybe Basil has decided to end his life because he has hurt the person he has loved. So, we see that longing for love in her character. So that should be kept in mind. And accordingly, you can make other points, okay? You can also add other things about Basil's characters, like he is the sort of man who can impress women in a way, because he impresses Miss Meadows, the headmaster's wife is impressed with him. So you can add that as a conclusion, and that can still count as a point. So you have to be very careful while you are writing, and you have to supplement with quotations, because that is important. That helps you put forth your point. It's not just for the sake of memorizing as many students take it. So you can specially focus on the character sketch. Specifically, you can focus on that, but there's no hard and fast rule. So what you can do is that you can read all the texts, all the themes from your workbook, and then you can come back to the text and analyze it. Okay, give 2 to 3 readings of the text and you will be good to go, and make short points for every sort of theme that you come across, and that should suffice. With that, I wish you good luck, and I'll see you in the next class.